his arms wrapped around me like iron chains disguised as salvation, and every eye in that glittering hall turned to witness my ruin. The candlelight exposed every stain on my threadbare dress, every tremor in my frozen fingers while his face remained carved from stone, unreadable and terrifying in its silence. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're watching from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The snow burned like cold embers when I fell, strengthless, onto the white carpet covering the castle's side courtyard. I could still feel against my skin the cruel heat of the laughter that had expelled me from that place. Female voices, sharp and dripping with malice, repeated through clenched teeth what I had always known to be true. I was not worthy of standing among them. Bastard, daughter of a maid, an inconvenient shadow amidst embroidered gowns and names of lineage. Perhaps, they thought, the snow would do the work that honor refused. Erase me without noise, like someone sweeping dust beneath a rug. The wind cut through the air, whistling like a steel tongue through the gaps of the high windows. Each gust seemed to mock my huddled body, reminding me of the fragility I tried so hard to conceal. I did not scream. I did not beg. Silence was my only resistance, even as my teeth chattered and my fingers burned as if they might shatter. All I had with me was a thread of blue ribbon, the minimal inheritance from my mother, hidden inside the frayed sleeve of my dress. This scrap of cloth was my only talisman, a reminder that I was once loved, however briefly, before being cast into shadow. What I did not expect was that when my eyelids grew heavy as iron and my breathing became faint, firm footsteps would echo across the snow. They did not belong to any of the cruel ladies who had pushed me toward oblivion. They were not from hurried servants. They were measured, grave, as if the ground itself recognized them. And then, before darkness took me completely, I saw his figure. The king, the Alpha. His broad shoulders covered by a black cloak were walls against the winter. His eyes, neither blue nor grey, but an uncertain tone between ice and steel, fixed upon my fallen body with something I would not dare call mercy. There was hardness there, as if he were weighing my worth, measuring whether I deserved breath or eternal silence. When his gloved hand brushed the snowflakes from my face, I felt more fear than hope. He was feared, revered, master of every gaze in the halls illuminated by candelabras. His voice alone was enough to define destinies. I was merely nobody. And yet, he lifted me. The world spun when his arms enveloped me, not in tenderness, but in absolute authority. I was light, insignificant against his chest, but the warmth emanating from his body returned a minimal flame to me. The air grew heavy. In the distance, from the illuminated windows, I knew eyes were watching. The social silence that had condemned me now broke into whispers and murmurs, echoing like hidden blades. The king carried in his arms what everyone judged disposable. Inside the hall, the contrast wounded my eyes. The brightness of hundreds of candles reflected in crystal and silver exposed every stain on my worn dress, every tremor of my fingers, every drop of melted snow dripping from my hair. Conversation ceased. The sound of his boots against the marble, rhythmic and relentless, carved a path through the atmosphere. I, an intruder, was now the spark that everyone stared at. I knew each glance, each whisper, would be a new sharpened knife against my skin. He said nothing. He merely deposited me before the fire crackling in the central hearth, his face immobile as a statue, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a question he did not dare voice. His silence crushed me more than any insult. The ladies who had earlier pushed me outside now smiled with painted lips and venomous eyes, disguising their unease. The scandal had already been born. The king, the unattainable one, had touched, carried, and exposed before everyone a bastard. It was not a private gesture. It was a public event, a challenge to the social order, and every heart in that room knew it. It was then that the voice of Lady Elira, my legitimate half-sister, pierced the air. "Your Majesty, I do not understand why such a despicable body deserves to stain your cloak." Her words, veiled in sweetness, were spilled poison. Contained laughter erupted in some corners. My eyes burned, not with tears but with a mute rage that had always sustained me. I remained upright, though trembling, though my dress clung to my damp body. If I fell, I would be destroyed. So I stood, whole though fragile. The king turned to her. He did not shout, did not raise his voice. He simply said in a grave tone that reverberated through the hall, "Despicable is the one who laughs at another's fall." The silence that followed was more deafening than any tumult. I saw my half-sister's eyes waver, her smile crack for an instant. And without realizing it, I noticed that everyone looked at me no longer as dust, but as an enigma. Still, humiliation burned inside me. I knew this was not a rescue from fairy tales. There was no pure kindness in his arms, but a gesture loaded with weight and purpose that I did not yet understand. The king had not saved me out of pity, of that I was certain. His gaze, when it pierced through me, seemed to search for something hidden within me, as if I carried a secret that even I did not know. And perhaps, in some way, I did. At the end of that night, when the musicians played in vain and the ladies pretended to dance under the shadow of scandal, I remained by the fire trying to drain the cold from my entrails. He passed by me again so close that the air seemed to bend. His fingers brushed for an instant the blue fabric hidden in my sleeve, as if they knew that there lay my last link to the memory of my mother. He said nothing. He only stared at me, and in that silence there was an unspoken promise, a veiled threat, a destiny that insinuated itself. I returned to the narrow corridors that night with my heart ablaze with contradictory flames. I was exposed, humiliated, saved, and marked in a single instant. The cold did not kill me, but his gaze chained me in a way that was perhaps worse. For I knew from that moment on I was no longer invisible. And when the Alpha King marks someone with the weight of his gaze, there is no possible return. And so it was, on the night they left me to die in the snow, that my destiny began to be woven before everyone, not by choice but by his hand. The following days bled into each other like watercolors in rain, each one staining the next with whispers and sideways glances. The castle, once a place where I moved as a ghost, had become a stage where my every step was observed, judged, dissected. The servants who had barely acknowledged my existence now watched me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The nobles who had laughed as I was cast into the snow now fell silent when I entered rooms, their expressions twisted into masks of false courtesy that barely concealed their contempt. I still slept in the cramped attic room I had occupied since childhood, a space so small that I could touch both walls with outstretched arms. The ceiling sloped to angles that forced me to duck when I rose from my narrow cot. A single window, more crack than opening, allowed slivers of moonlight to paint silver lines across the rough wooden floor. This room had been my sanctuary, my hiding place from a world that deemed me unworthy. Now it felt like a cage. My mother had died when I was 7, her body worn thin by years of servitude and the shame of bearing a lord's bastard child. She had been beautiful once, they said, beautiful enough to catch the eye of Lord Harwick during one of his visits to the kitchens, beautiful enough to destroy. She never told me who my father was, but I had pieced it together from stolen glances and carefully constructed silences. Lord Harwick, Lady Elira's father, the man whose legitimate blood ran through my half-sister's veins, while mine carried only the stain of secrecy and sin. Lady Elira had made it her life's mission to remind me of this difference. Where I wore patched and faded fabrics, she draped herself in silks that whispered with each movement. Where I braided my dark hair in a simple plait, she arranged her golden locks in elaborate styles that required 3 maids to construct. She was everything I was not: legitimate, loved, destined for a marriage that would elevate her status even further. And she hated me with a passion that burned brighter than any love she might have known. The night of the snowfall, the night that changed everything, had begun as so many others. A grand feast in the main hall, celebrating the winter solstice and the Alpha King's continued reign over our territories. I had been assigned to serve in the kitchens, hauling heavy platters of roasted meat and delicate pastries up the narrow servants' stairs. Never meant to enter the glittering hall where music and laughter flowed like wine. But Lady Elira had other plans. She found me in the corridor outside the ballroom carrying a tray of crystal goblets that caught the candlelight like captured stars. Her lips curved in a smile that made my stomach clench with dread. "Sister," she said, the word dripping with mockery. "How fortunate I am to find you here. We have need of your services." 3 of her friends flanked her, daughters of counts and earls, their beauty as sharp and dangerous as unsheathed blades. They wore gowns in jewel tones, emerald, sapphire, ruby. Against their brilliance, my grey servant's dress looked like ash. "The king has requested a particular wine," Lady Elira continued, her voice honey-sweet and venomous. "It is kept in the cellar beyond the courtyard. Surely you know where that is?" I knew. I also knew that the courtyard would be knee-deep in snow, that the wind howled through it like a living thing, that no one would send a servant on such an errand during a feast unless they meant harm. But I also knew that refusing Lady Elira would bring worse consequences than cold. So I nodded, set down my tray, and made my way toward the side entrance. The moment I stepped into the courtyard, I understood their true intention. The door slammed shut behind me, and I heard the heavy bolts slide into place. Through the thick wood, I heard their laughter, cruel and bright as breaking glass. "Perhaps the cold will teach her some humility," one of them said. "Or perhaps it will teach her to know her place," Lady Elira replied, "permanently." I pounded on the door until my fists were numb, called out until my voice grew hoarse. No one came. The snow fell heavier, and the wind tore through my thin dress as if it were made of paper. I tried the other doors around the courtyard, but they were all locked or frozen shut. The castle loomed above me, its windows glowing with warmth and life, unreachable as stars. Eventually, I stopped fighting. The cold seeped into my bones, making me drowsy. I thought of my mother, wondered if she had felt this same resignation when she realized she was dying, this same quiet acceptance of an unjust fate. I pulled the blue ribbon from my sleeve, the only thing she had given me that was truly hers, and clutched it in my frozen fingers. If I was going to die here, I would die holding on to her memory. That was when I heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, growing closer. I tried to lift my head, but found I could not. My body had become a stranger to me, refusing to obey commands. Through the veil of falling snow, I saw him, tall as a legend, broad as a fortress wall, wrapped in a cloak that seemed to devour the light. The Alpha King. I had seen him only from a distance before, a figure of power and fear who moved through the world like a force of nature. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His face was carved from shadows and sharp angles, all hard planes and uncompromising lines. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and those eyes, those impossible eyes that seemed to hold the weight of winter itself, fixed upon me with an intensity that made my failing heart stutter. He did not speak. He simply knelt beside me, and the snow hissed and melted where his body heat touched it. When he lifted me, I felt the strength in his arms, the controlled power that could crush or cradle with equal ease. He did not ask if I needed help. He did not question why I lay dying in the snow. He simply claimed me, as if I was something he had decided to possess, and carried me toward the castle. I wanted to protest, to explain that I was no one worth saving, that his touch would only bring me more suffering when the nobles saw what he had done. But my voice had fled, and my body trembled so violently that I could not form words. All I could do was rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath layers of fabric and muscle, so different from my own frantic, failing rhythm. He kicked open the door to the main hall. The music stopped mid-note. Conversations died like snuffed candles. Every eye in that glittering assembly turned to stare at us, at the king carrying a half-frozen servant girl as if she were a bride. I felt their gazes like brands against my skin, burning away what little dignity I had left. The warmth of the hall rushed over me, painful after the numbing cold. I could see everything too clearly now. The nobles in their finery, the servants frozen in their duties, the musicians with their instruments held awkwardly in silent hands. And there, near the front of the crowd, Lady Elira and her friends, their faces pale with shock that rapidly transformed into something like fear. The king carried me to the central hearth, where a fire roared high and hot. He set me down before it, not gently but with purpose, and I swayed on my feet, barely able to stand. My dress dripped melted snow onto the polished marble floor, creating a spreading puddle that reflected the firelight like scattered gold coins. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never be seen again. But I remained standing, because falling now would mean admitting defeat. That was when Lady Elira spoke, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "Your Majesty, I do not understand why such a despicable body deserves to stain your cloak." The words landed like stones. I heard the intake of breath from those around us, the barely concealed laughter from some corners. My half-sister stood there, resplendent in her crimson gown, her golden hair gleaming in the candlelight, and smiled at me with triumph in her eyes. This was what she had wanted all along, to humiliate me publicly, to prove beyond doubt that I was beneath notice, beneath care, beneath life itself. I waited for the king to agree with her, to realize his error in touching someone so low, to cast me aside as he should have done from the beginning. Instead, he turned to face Lady Elira. His movement was slow, controlled, predatory. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the roaring fire. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the vast hall. "Despicable is the one who laughs at another's fall." The silence that followed was absolute. I saw my half-sister's smile freeze, then crack like thin ice under weight. Her face went from triumph to confusion to something approaching terror in the space of 3 heartbeats. Around her, her friends took small steps backward, distancing themselves from her as if she carried plague. The king did not elaborate. He did not need to. In those few words, he had shifted the entire dynamic of the room. No longer was I the object of scorn. Now I was something else, something uncertain and therefore dangerous. And Lady Elira, who had orchestrated my near-death, was marked as the true villain of this tale. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt only dread, because I understood what this meant. The Alpha King did not involve himself in petty disputes between nobles and servants. He did not rescue dying girls from snowdrifts. He certainly did not publicly rebuke the legitimate daughter of one of his most powerful lords. Unless there was a reason. Unless I was somehow valuable to him in a way I could not comprehend. His eyes found mine again, and I saw nothing comforting in them. No warmth, no kindness, no reassurance. Only assessment, calculation, and something darker that I could not name. He looked at me the way a wolf might look at prey it had decided to save from other predators. Not out of mercy, but because it wanted the kill for itself. My hand went instinctively to my sleeve, seeking the comfort of my mother's ribbon. But it was not there. In the chaos of being carried inside, it must have fallen. Panic flared in my chest. That ribbon was all I had, the only proof that I had once been someone's daughter, someone's beloved child. Without it, I was truly nothing. The king's gaze followed my frantic movement. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw understanding flash across his features. He knew. Somehow he knew what I had lost, what it meant to me. And he said nothing, did nothing to help me find it. Instead, he simply turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor, leaving me standing there in my puddle of melted snow, shaking and exposed before the assembled court. The musicians eventually resumed playing. Hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. The nobles returned to their conversations, though their voices carried a new note of speculation. The servants, after a moment of uncertainty, went back to their duties. But everything had changed. I was no longer invisible. I was a mystery, a question mark, something the king had touched and therefore transformed. Lady Elira and her friends disappeared quickly, melting into the crowd like sugar in hot water. I did not see them again that night. But I felt their hatred in the air, a tangible thing that promised future vengeance. I had embarrassed them, had become the instrument of their public humiliation, and they would make me pay for it in ways both subtle and severe. I remained by the fire until my dress was dry and my shaking had subsided to occasional tremors. No one approached me. No one spoke to me. I existed in a bubble of uncertain status, neither servant nor guest, neither welcome nor explicitly unwelcome. When I finally gathered the courage to leave, to return to my attic room, I walked through corridors that seemed different somehow, charged with new possibility and new danger. My room was exactly as I had left it, small, cramped, cold. But I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The way the door did not lock from the inside. The way the window, though small, could be forced open if someone wanted entry. The way sound carried through the thin walls, meaning anyone in the adjacent rooms could hear everything I said or did. I had thought this space a sanctuary. Now I realized it was a trap. I did not sleep that night. I lay on my narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the castle settle around me. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind, every distant footstep made my heart race. I had survived the snow, but I was not safe. The king's intervention had saved my life, but put my soul in jeopardy. Because now I was noticed. Now I was important. And importance in a world ruled by power and politics was the most dangerous thing a bastard girl could possess. Morning came slowly, the winter sun struggling, through clouds heavy with unshed snow. I rose from my cot, splashed icy water from the basin onto my face, and braided my hair with fingers that still trembled slightly. I had duties to attend to, work that would not wait simply because my world had been turned upside down. The kitchen would expect me, and absence would only bring more questions, more attention. But when I descended the narrow servants' stairs and entered the vast kitchen, I found the head cook waiting for me, her face drawn with an expression I could not read. "The king's steward has sent for you," she said without preamble. "You are to present yourself to the royal chambers immediately." The wooden spoon I had picked up clattered to the floor. Around me, the other servants stopped their work, watching with barely concealed interest. Being summoned to the royal chambers was unprecedented for someone of my station. It meant either great fortune or terrible doom, and given my luck, I suspected the latter. "Did he say why?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The head cook shook her head. "It is not our place to question the king's commands. Go. Do not keep him waiting." I walked through the castle as if moving through a dream. The corridors that had once been so familiar now seemed foreign, threatening. Nobles I passed stopped their conversations to watch me, their faces masks of curiosity and calculation. Servants pressed themselves against walls to let me pass, as if I had become something contagious. By the time I reached the royal wing, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The king's steward was an old man with steel-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked me up and down with visible disapproval, taking in my servant's dress, my simple braid, my calloused hands. "You will address His Majesty as Your Majesty, or Sire," he said crisply. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not meet his eyes unless he commands it. You will not touch anything, approach anything, or presume anything. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He sighed, as if my very existence pained him, and pushed open the heavy oak doors. The king's chambers were nothing like I had imagined. I had expected opulence, gold and jewels and silk everywhere. Instead, I found a space that was almost austere. Heavy furniture made of dark wood, walls lined with books and maps, a fireplace that burned low and steady. The only hint of luxury was the thick carpet beneath my feet and the large windows that overlooked the mountains beyond. The king stood before one of those windows, his back to me, his hands clasped behind him. He wore black, as he always did, the colour making him seem carved from shadow rather than flesh. He did not turn when I entered. He did not acknowledge me at all for long, silent moments that stretched like pulled thread. "Your name," he finally said, his voice low and rough, as if he had been shouting orders all night. "Mira," I whispered. "Mira Horrick, though I have no claim to the name." "Mira," he repeated it slowly, as if tasting each syllable. "The bastard daughter of Lord Horrick's dalliance with a kitchen maid." It was not a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, Your Majesty. Do you know why you are still alive, Mira?" The question struck me like a blow. "Because you saved me." "No." He turned then, and the full force of his gaze hit me like a physical thing. "You are alive because I chose to save you. There is a difference. One implies chance. The other implies intention." I did not know how to respond to that. I stood there trembling, waiting for him to explain what intention could possibly involve someone like me. He crossed the room, his movements fluid and controlled, until he stood close enough that I could smell the scent of winter wind and something darker. Something that reminded me of iron and earth. He was tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Hunger. Not the physical kind, but something deeper, more primal. He looked at me the way a man dying of thirst might look at water, with desperate need barely held in check by iron will. "You have something that belongs to me," he said softly. I thought of the ribbon, lost somewhere in the snow or trampled underfoot in the hall. "I don't have anything, Your Majesty. I own nothing but my mother's memory." "Not something you possess." His hand rose and I flinched instinctively, expecting violence. But he only brushed his fingers against the side of my neck, just below my ear, and I felt something there, something that made my skin tingle and burn. "Something you are." I could not breathe, could not think. His touch was doing impossible things to my senses, making the room spin and my heart race faster than fear alone could account for. "Do you know what an alpha truly is, Mira?" he asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We are not simply leaders or warriors. We are hunters. We can sense things others cannot. Bloodlines, destinies, bonds." "I don't understand," I gasped. "You will." He dropped his hand and I nearly collapsed from the sudden absence of contact. "You carry a bloodline that was thought extinct, a power that should not exist. And that power calls to me like a bell in the darkness." Fear flooded through me, cold and sharp. "I have no power. I'm nothing. Nobody." "You are the key to a door I have been trying to open for 7 years." His smile was not comforting. It was the smile of a wolf that had finally cornered its prey. "Your mother knew what you were. That is why she hid you, disguised you as a simple servant's daughter. But she could not hide you forever. And now that I have found you, I will not let you go." "What do you want from me?" The question came out as a plea. "Everything." He turned back to the window, dismissing me with the gesture. "You will move from the servants' quarters to rooms in the East Wing. You will be provided with appropriate clothing and education. You will learn courtly manners, history, and the customs of nobility. In 6 months, you will be presented at court as my intended bride." The world tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. "That's impossible. I'm a bastard. The lords would never accept it. Lady Elira, her father, will accept what I command them to accept." His voice hardened. "I am the Alpha King. My word is law. And I have decided that you will be my queen." "But why?" I cried out, abandoning all protocol. "Why me? You could have anyone. Any woman of noble birth who would bring you alliances and power. Why choose a servant girl who will only bring you trouble?" He looked at me over his shoulder, and for a moment I saw something almost like regret in his expression. "Because you are the only one who can give me what I need. And because, Mira Harwick, whether you know it yet or not, you were always meant to be mine." The steward returned then, his knock brisk and businesslike. The king nodded to him, and I was ushered out of the room, my mind reeling, my heart pounding, my entire world reconstructed in the space of a single conversation. I was to be the Alpha King's bride. The impossible had become inevitable, and as I walked through the corridors toward my new life, I felt the weight of destiny settling onto my shoulders like chains made of starlight and iron. The East Wing was a world apart from the cramped attic I had called home. My new rooms consisted of a bedchamber larger than any space I had ever inhabited, a sitting room with tall windows that overlooked the rose garden, and a small private library filled with books I could barely read. The bed was a massive 4-poster affair with velvet curtains and sheets softer than clouds. The wardrobe held gowns in colours I had only seen from a distance: midnight blue, deep emerald, rich burgundy, all with embroidery so fine it looked like fairy work. But luxury could not erase fear. I stood in the centre of my new bedchamber, turning slowly, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. This could not be real. This could not be happening to me. A knock at the door made me jump. A woman entered, middle-aged and stern-faced, dressed in the simple but well-made clothes of an upper servant. She curtsied, which shocked me more than anything else that day. "My lady," she said, and the title sounded foreign applied to me. "I am Mistress Adele. I have been assigned as your lady's maid and tutor. We have much work to do before you can be presented at court." "I don't understand any of this," I said honestly. "Yesterday I was hauling water from the well. Today I'm supposed to become a queen. Mistress Adele's expression softened slightly. The ways of the Alpha King are not for us to question. He has claimed you, and therefore you must become worthy of that claim. Now we should start with the basics. Can you read? Some, I admitted. My mother taught me before she died. Good. That will make things easier. Can you dance? Play an instrument? Embroider? Speak any languages other than our common tongue? I shook my head to each question, feeling more inadequate with every passing moment. Then we begin immediately. She clapped her hands, and 2 younger maids entered, carrying what looked like instruments of torture. Corsets, shoes with heels, gloves that button to the elbow. First, we address your appearance. A queen must look the part. The next hours were agony. They stripped me down and scrubbed my skin until it was raw, washed my hair with perfumed soaps that made my eyes water, trimmed my nails and filed them smooth. The corset squeezed my ribs until I could barely breathe, and the gown they selected, a pale blue silk that reminded me painfully of my mother's ribbon, weighed more than my old servant's dress ever had. When they finally let me look in the mirror, I did not recognize the woman staring back. She had my face, my dark eyes, my sharp cheekbones, but she looked like nobility, like someone who belonged in these rooms in this life. The transformation should have pleased me. Instead, it felt like erasure. Better, Mistress Adele said with the first hint of approval. Now we work on your posture. A lady does not slouch, does not shuffle, does not fidget. You must learn to move with grace and purpose. For hours, she made me walk back and forth across the room, balancing a book on my head while she critiqued every step. Shorter strides. Chin up, shoulders back. Do not look at your feet, Mira. A queen looks forward, always forward. By the time she finally released me, my feet ached, my back hurt, and I wanted nothing more than to collapse onto that massive bed. But Mistress Adele had other plans. Now we discuss etiquette. How to greet nobles of various ranks. How to hold a teacup. How to navigate conversation at formal dinners. How to dance. How to... Please, I interrupted, my voice breaking. I cannot learn all of this in one day. I cannot become someone else overnight. Mistress Adele studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she sat down beside me and took my hand. Her touch was firm but not unkind. Child, I understand your fear, but you must understand the position you are in. The Alpha King has chosen you for reasons he has not shared with anyone. That choice has made you powerful, but power breeds jealousy and hatred. There are those in this court who would see you fail, who would seize any opportunity to prove you unworthy. Lady Elira and her allies will not forgive or forget what happened last night. They will watch your every move, waiting for you to stumble. Then I'm doomed, I whispered. I will stumble. I don't know how to be what he wants. Then learn. Her grip tightened. Learn quickly, learn well, and learn to hide your doubts. The Alpha King has given you an impossible gift, the chance to rise above your birth. Do not waste it. That night, I lay in my luxurious bed, unable to sleep despite exhaustion. The mattress was too soft, the room too large, the silence too profound. I found myself longing for my cramped attic, for the familiar discomforts and the anonymity that came with being nobody. But I was nobody no longer. I was the Alpha King's chosen bride, and that meant I had enemies I did not know how to fight and a destiny I did not understand. The king had said I carried a bloodline, a power, but I felt nothing except fear and confusion. If I truly had power, why had it not protected me from years of abuse and neglect? Why had it not saved my mother? Sleep finally claimed me near dawn, and I dreamed of my mother. She stood in a field of snow, wearing the blue dress I remembered from childhood, the ribbon tied in her dark hair. She reached out to me, her lips moving, trying to tell me something important. But no sound emerged. And then the snow consumed her, and I was alone again, as I had always been. I woke to find Mistress Adele shaking my shoulder. Up, child, the day begins, and you have much to learn. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of lessons and transformations. I learned to dance, my feet following patterns that felt unnatural at first but gradually became familiar. I learned to read faster, consuming books on history and politics that made my head ache with new information. I learned the names and ranks of every noble family in the kingdom, their alliances and feuds, their strengths and weaknesses. Most importantly, I learned to hide my fear behind a mask of calm composure, to hide my doubts behind carefully chosen words, to hide my loneliness behind the appearance of contentment. Mistress Adele taught me that a queen's face was her armor, and I needed to make mine impenetrable. But the king himself remained absent. After our initial encounter, I did not see him for weeks. I heard reports of his movements, hunting parties in the northern forests, meetings with his council, inspections of border fortifications. He was everywhere except where I was, and I did not know if I should feel relieved or anxious about his absence. Then, 3 weeks after my transformation began, I was summoned to dinner in the small dining hall. Not the grand feast hall where hundreds gathered, but an intimate space meant for the royal family and their closest advisors. Mistress Adele dressed me with extra care that evening, selecting a gown of deep green velvet that brought out the subtle green flecks in my brown eyes. "Remember everything I have taught you," she said, as she arranged my hair in an elaborate updo. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not eat until he begins. Do not—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "I remember." She nodded, but I saw worry in her eyes. "The Alpha King is not like other men, Mira. He does not think as they do, does not feel as they do. He is ruled by instinct and power in ways that can be unsettling. But he has chosen you, and I believe he has reasons beyond what he has revealed. Trust in that, if you can trust in nothing else." The small dining hall was lit by candles and a roaring fireplace. A table had been set for two, intimate and isolating. The king already sat at the head, dressed in his customary black, his eyes fixed on me as I entered. I curtsied as I had been taught, low and graceful, holding the position until he spoke. "Sit." I took the chair to his right, arranging my skirts as Mistress Adele had shown me, keeping my hands folded in my lap, my back straight, my expression neutral. A servant appeared to pour wine, and I waited as the king lifted his glass first. He did not drink immediately. Instead, he studied me over the rim, his gaze traveling from my elaborately arranged hair to my elegant gown, taking in every detail of my transformation. "You look like a stranger," he finally said. "I'm trying to become what you need me to be. Your Majesty? And what do you think I need?" The question felt like a trap. I chose my words carefully. "A queen who will not embarrass you before the court. Someone who can stand beside you without causing scandal." "Scandal?" He set down his glass untasted. "Mira, from the moment I carried you into that hall, scandal became inevitable. Choosing you was choosing scandal. Your appearance, your manners, your ability to navigate courtly politics, none of these things will prevent that. The scandal is not your fault. It is mine for making a choice that defies tradition. Then why make it?" The words escaped before I could stop them, more challenge than question. His eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "I am trying to understand it. You say I have some power, some bloodline, but I feel nothing except confusion. You say we are bonded, but you have avoided me for weeks. You say I will be your queen, but you have not told me anything about what that truly means. I am a puppet being dressed and positioned, and I do not know who pulls the strings or why." Silence fell, heavy and dangerous. I had overstepped, broken every rule Mistress Adele had drilled into me. I waited for his anger, for the punishment that must surely follow such impertinence. Instead, he laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, more surprise than amusement, but it transformed his face entirely. For a moment, he looked younger, less burdened by the weight of his crown. "You are not wrong," he said finally. "I have kept you in the dark. Perhaps that was unfair. But understand this, Mira, the truth I carry is dangerous. Not dangerous to me, but dangerous to you. Ignorance, in your case, has been a form of protection. I don't want protection. I want understanding." He leaned back in his chair, considering. Then he gestured to the servants, who quickly withdrew, closing the doors behind them. We were alone. "Very well. I will tell you a story, and you will decide what to believe." He steepled his fingers, his expression growing distant. 7 years ago, my mate died. The word struck me like lightning. Mate, not wife, not queen. Mate, with all the primal significance that word carried among alpha bloodlines. She was killed by those who feared what our union would create. She was the last of an ancient line, carriers of a power that could strengthen or destroy the bonds that hold our territories together. When she died, I believed that power died with her, that I would remain mateless, alone, unable to complete the destiny we had begun together. He fell silent, and I saw grief flicker across his face, raw and unhealed despite the passage of years. But 3 months ago, I felt it again. That call, that recognition, faint but unmistakable. Someone in my kingdom carried the bloodline I thought extinct. I searched quietly, carefully, trying not to alert those who would seek to destroy what I sought to protect. And then, one night during a winter feast, I found her. Found you! But I'm a bastard daughter of a maid, I protested. My mother never mentioned any special bloodline. She was nobody just like me. Your mother, he said softly, was a princess in hiding. The last surviving child of the House of Thornwood, thought to have been wiped out in the blood purge 25 years ago. She survived by becoming invisible, by taking work as a servant, by never using the power she carried. And she passed that power to you. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. That's impossible. My mother was a kitchen maid. She died of fever and exhaustion, not like a princess would die. She died protecting you from the same fate that claimed her family. She died keeping you hidden, keeping you safe, until someone could find you and claim you properly. His hand reached across the table, palm up, an offering. I am that someone, Mira. Your mother's bloodline and mine are meant to unite. That is why you feel the pull between us, why my touch affects you, why your presence calls to something deep within me. We are meant to be bound, to restore a power that can protect our people from threats most do not even know exist. I stared at his offered hand. This man who was both terrifying and magnetic, who claimed to be my destined mate, who had turned my entire world upside down with his revelations. I don't feel powerful, I whispered. I feel lost. The power is there, dormant but real. It will awaken when we complete the bond. Until then, you must trust me. And you must let me protect you from those who would kill you before that awakening can occur. Lady Elira, I said slowly. She tried to kill me. Did she know? I don't believe so. She simply saw you as an annoyance, a reminder of her father's indiscretion. But there are others in this court who suspect, who watch and wait. The same forces that killed my first mate still exist, still plot, still hunger to prevent the restoration of the old powers. They will see you as a threat. Then shouldn't I remain hidden? Isn't presenting me at court putting a target on my back? Yes, he said bluntly. But hiding you is no longer an option. The moment I saved you, the moment I carried you into that hall and rebuked Lady Elira, I announced to everyone watching that you were important to me. The question had been asked, and now I must provide the answer. You are my chosen bride, and anyone who threatens you threatens me. I finally placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and I felt that pull he spoke of, a current of electricity that ran from his skin to mine, making my pulse race and my breath catch. This is madness, I said. Yes, he agreed. But it is necessary madness. And Mira, whether you feel ready or not, whether you understand or not, you must play your part. Because if you fail, if you falter, if you show weakness, our enemies will strike. And this time, I may not be able to save you. The weight of his words settled onto me like a shroud. I was not simply learning to be a queen. I was learning to survive a game I had not known I was playing, against enemies I could not see, for stakes I had only begun to understand. When will the presentation be? I asked. In 2 months, at the spring equinox celebration. Every noble house will attend, and I will announce our engagement before them all. 2 months, 8 weeks to become someone I was not, to prepare for a future I had never imagined, to steel myself against threats both known and unknown. I will do my best, I said, because what else could I say? I know. He released my hand, and I felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. Now eat. You will need your strength. We dined in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence, one charged with shared secrets and reluctant understanding. I was no longer simply confused. I was informed, and that information was both burden and gift. When the meal ended and I rose to leave, he called my name. I turned back to find him standing, the firelight casting shadows across his face. Mira, one more thing. Do not trust easily. Even among those who seem friendly, there may be enemies. Keep your doubts private, your fears hidden. And if you find yourself in danger, call for me. I will hear you, no matter where you are. How? I asked. He smiled, that same wolfish smile that was more warning than warmth. Because we are bonded, even if the bond is not yet complete. Your voice will always find me. I left the dining hall with more questions than answers, but also with a strange sense of purpose. I was not simply a bastard girl anymore. I was the hidden princess, the alpha's mate, the key to powers I did not understand. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was my destiny. The next weeks passed in accelerated preparation. Mistress Adele intensified my lessons, adding etiquette for formal presentations. The proper way to receive homage from nobles. The subtle art of political conversation where every word carried layers of meaning. I practiced my curtsy until my legs ached. Practiced my smile until my face felt frozen. Practiced the careful neutrality required of someone who would be queen. But I also began to feel something else. The stirring of that power the king had spoken of. It came in small moments, flashes of intuition that proved correct, dreams that felt like memories of lives I had never lived. A tingling in my palms when strong emotions overtook me. I told no one about these experiences, not even Mistress Adele. The king had warned me to trust carefully, and I took that warning to heart. I also began to see the court politics more clearly. The nobles who visited the East Wing, ostensibly to welcome me, actually came to assess and report. I learned to read the calculation in their eyes, the false warmth of their smiles. Lady Elira sent no representative, made no overture, but I felt her hatred like a distant storm, always on the horizon. The king himself visited me occasionally, always briefly, always formally. We would sit in my parlor and discuss books or history or the governance of the kingdom. He never touched me as he had that first night, never spoke of bonds or destiny. But I felt the connection between us growing stronger with each encounter, a thread of awareness that made me always conscious of his presence, even when he was not near. Then, 1 week before the spring equinox, everything changed again. I woke in the middle of the night to find my room filled with smoke. Not the gentle smoke from a fireplace, but thick, acrid clouds that choked and blinded. Fire. The castle was burning. I rolled from bed, coughing, my eyes streaming, trying to orient myself in the suffocating darkness. The door to my chamber was hot to the touch, impassable. The windows were my only escape, but I was 3 floors up, and the drop would surely kill me. I remembered the king's words. If you find yourself in danger, call for me. I did not call with my voice, which was too choked with smoke to produce sound. Instead, I called with my mind, with my heart, with every fiber of my being, screaming his name into the darkness. Help me! Time stretched. The smoke grew thicker. I sank to the floor, where the air was marginally clearer, pressing my face against the cool stone, trying to breathe, trying to survive. My vision began to tunnel, darkness creeping in at the edges. I thought of my mother, wondered if I would see her soon, if death would be a reunion or simply an end. Then the window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. A figure swung through the opening, massive and impossibly fast, wrapping me in arms that I recognized instantly even through my oxygen-starved delirium. The king, he had come. He had heard me. He did not speak, did not pause. He simply gathered me against his chest and leaped from the window. We fell, the ground rushing up with terrifying speed, but he twisted mid-air, landing in a crouch that absorbed the impact. I felt the jolt but did not feel pain. He had taken the worst of it, protecting me even in that impossible maneuver. He ran, carrying me away from the burning wing, across the courtyard, into another section of the castle. Behind us I heard shouts, the roar of flames, the crack of wood surrendering to fire. My beautiful rooms, the sanctuary I had only just begun to accept, were being consumed. He took me to his own chambers, laying me on his bed, checking me for injuries with hands that were surprisingly gentle. Soot covered his face, and his eyes blazed with a fury I had never seen before. "Who did this?" he demanded. I could only shake my head, coughing too hard to speak. He called for the royal physician, who came quickly and examined me. declared me suffering from smoke inhalation, but otherwise unharmed. He administered a tonic that eased my coughing and left me drowsy. Through my haze, I heard the king issuing orders, his voice cold and absolute. Find out who set that fire. Search every room in the castle. Question every servant. I want answers by dawn, or heads will roll. Later, when the physician had left, and I lay half asleep in the Alpha King's enormous bed, I felt him sit beside me. His hand brushed hair back from my forehead, a touch so tender it made my heart ache. They nearly succeeded, he said quietly, speaking more to himself than to me. I nearly lost you before the bond could be completed. Who? I managed to ask. I have my suspicions, but suspicions are not proof, and I cannot move against noble houses without evidence. His hand stilled. But this changes the timeline. I will not wait 2 more weeks and risk another attempt. Tomorrow you will become my queen. Tomorrow we complete the bond. And may the gods help anyone who tries to stop us. I wanted to argue, to say I was not ready, that I needed more time, but the words would not come. Because he was right. Waiting meant vulnerability. Waiting meant giving our enemies more chances to strike. And I was tired of being a target, tired of being afraid. Tomorrow, I whispered in agreement. He stayed with me through the night, sitting in a chair beside the bed, a silent guardian against the darkness. I slept fitfully, waking often to find him still there, watching over me with those intense eyes that saw too much and revealed too little. And each time I woke, I felt safer, more certain that whatever came next, I would not face it alone. Dawn arrived with a castle in chaos. The fire had been contained to my wing, but the damage was extensive. Investigations had revealed clear evidence of arson. Accelerants splashed on the walls, the doors deliberately blocked from the outside. This was not accident or negligence. This was murder attempted and barely thwarted. The king called an emergency assembly of all nobles currently residing in the castle. I watched from behind a screen as they gathered in the throne room, their faces ranging from concern to calculation. Lady Elira stood among them, her expression carefully neutral, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. The Alpha King did not sit on his throne. He stood before it, a figure of controlled rage, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Last night, someone attempted to murder the woman I have chosen as my mate and queen. This was not a random act of violence. This was a deliberate attack on me, on my authority, on the future of this kingdom. I will know who is responsible, and when I do, they will face not just my justice, but the full weight of Alpha Law. A murmur ran through the assembly. Alpha Law was ancient, brutal, and inviolable. It superseded noble privileges and traditional courts. Under Alpha Law, the king could exact any punishment he deemed fit, and no one could gainsay him. However, he continued, I will not let this attack delay what must occur. Today, immediately, I will complete the mating bond with Mira Harwick. She will become my queen, my mate, the mother of my heirs. Any who object may speak now, and we will settle the matter according to Alpha tradition. Challenge. He was offering them the opportunity to challenge his choice through ritual combat. It was an old custom, rarely invoked, but binding. Anyone who challenged would face the Alpha King in single combat to the death. No one spoke. No one moved. Lady Elira's face went pale, but she remained silent. Then it is settled. The king gestured, and I emerged from behind the screen, wearing the same soot-stained nightdress I had fled the fire in. My hair loose and wild, my face marked by the night's terror. I looked nothing like a queen. I looked like what I was, a survivor. Come, Mira, he said, and I walked to his side, my bare feet silent on the cold marble. He took my hand, and the moment our skin touched, I felt it. That electric current multiplying 1,000-fold, that pull becoming an irresistible force. The air around us seemed to shimmer, and I heard gasps from the assembled nobles. The king began to speak in a language I did not know, ancient words that resonated with power. With each syllable, the connection between us grew stronger, more tangible. I felt his presence in my mind, his strength flowing into me, his will binding to mine. And I felt, for the first time, my own power awakening, surging up from deep within. a tide of energy that had been dormant my entire life. The room filled with light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I saw the faces of the nobles, shocked and awed, some covering their eyes against the brilliance. I saw Lady Elira sink to her knees, her face twisted with rage and fear, and I felt myself changing, becoming something more than I had been, something ancient and powerful and terrifying. When the light faded and the words ended, I stood transformed. Not in appearance, but in essence. I was no longer simply Mira the bastard, Mira the servant, Mira the victim. I was Mira the queen, Mira the mate, Mira the bearer of the Thornwood line. And every person in that room could sense the difference. The Alpha King turned to me, and in his eyes I saw pride, satisfaction, and something deeper that I was only beginning to recognize. "It is done," he said. "You are mine, and I am yours, bound until death and beyond." I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt complete, as if a piece of me that had always been missing had finally clicked into place. "Until death and beyond," I echoed. The assembly erupted in stunned conversation, but the king silenced them with a gesture. "The investigation into the fire continues. No one leaves the castle until the guilty party is found. And know this, my mate is under my protection. Any threat to her is a threat to me, and I do not forgive threats." He led me from the throne room, his hand warm and steady in mine, and I felt the weight of every gaze following us. The scandal the king had predicted was now fully realized. But I found I no longer cared about scandal, about propriety, about the opinions of nobles who had never seen me as anything but disposable. I was the queen now, and queens did not beg for acceptance. They commanded it. In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. The investigation into the fire uncovered evidence pointing to several servants who had been bribed, but tracking the source of that bribery proved more difficult. The trail went cold at a dead drop used by multiple parties, and though suspicion fell heavily on Lady Elira and her faction, there was no definitive proof. I moved into the Queen's chambers, rooms even more magnificent than those that had burned. I was given a guard detail, trained warriors who shadowed my every step. And I began to truly learn what it meant to be queen, to wield power not through manipulation, but through authority backed by the Alpha bond. The power the king had spoken of manifested in unexpected ways. I could sense emotions in those around me, read the truth beneath their words. I could command small magics, lighting candles with a thought, warming rooms with my presence, healing minor hurts with my touch. And most importantly, I could communicate with the king across distances, our minds linked by the completed bond. The spring equinox celebration arrived, smaller than originally planned due to the ongoing investigation, but still magnificent. I wore a gown of silver and blue, my hair crowned with a circlet of white gold, and stood beside my mate as he formally presented me to the remaining nobles. Their homage was given, some enthusiastically, others reluctantly, but all binding. I was their queen, and they had no choice but to acknowledge me. Lady Elira was among the last to approach. She curtsied correctly, her face a mask of proper deference, but her eyes promised vengeance. When she rose and took my hand to kiss the ring I now wore, she whispered so quietly that only I could hear. "You may have won him, but you will never be safe, never be certain. Every shadow will hold my hatred." I smiled at her, the same cool smile I had learned from Mistress Adele, and whispered back, "Then you will live in your hatred, while I live in his love. And we both know which is the better prison." She flinched as if I had struck her, and I saw for the first time defeat in her eyes. She had lost and she knew it. The game was over, and I had emerged victorious not through cunning or manipulation, but simply by being what the Alpha King needed me to be. As the celebration continued into the night, I stood on a balcony overlooking the festivities, my mate beside me. The spring air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and new beginnings. I thought of my mother, wished she could see what her daughter had become, hoped she would be proud of the journey I had taken from servant to queen. "Regrets?" the king asked quietly. "None," I answered honestly. "Fear, yes. Uncertainty, certainly. But no regrets." He pulled me close and I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my cheek. "The danger has not passed," he warned. "There will be more attempts, more threats. The forces that killed my first mate will not accept defeat easily." "Then we will face them together," I said, "as we were always meant to." He kissed the top of my head, a gesture of tenderness that still surprised me from this man of such fierce power. Yes, together. And as I stood there, wrapped in his arms, watching the nobles dance and celebrate below, I realized something profound. I was no longer afraid of my destiny. I had been forged in fire and snow, in humiliation and triumph, in pain and unexpected love. I had survived the worst that court politics could throw at me, and I had emerged not just intact, but powerful. I was the Alpha King's queen, bearer of an ancient bloodline, survivor of assassination attempts, and defender of a future I was only beginning to understand. The journey had been impossible, the transformation complete. And though challenges lay ahead, though enemies still plotted in shadows, I knew with absolute certainty that I would face them all. Because I was no longer the girl left to die in the snow. I was the woman who had risen from that death to claim her crown. And nothing, not Lady Elira's hatred, not unseen enemies, not even the weight of my own doubts, would ever make me fall again. The story of how a bastard servant became an Alpha Queen would be told for generations. But I knew the truth that history would miss. It was not a story of luck or chance. It was a story of survival, of hidden strength, of destinies that refused to be denied. And it was, above all, my story. As the night deepened and the celebrations continued, I turned to the king, my mate, my chosen destiny, and said, "What happens now?" He smiled, that rare smile that transformed his entire face. "Now, my queen, we begin." And we did. If you've followed Mira's journey from the frozen courtyard to the throne, from vulnerability to power, from invisibility to majesty, then you know the magic of transformation is real. This story of survival, destiny, and unexpected love reminds us that who we are is not defined by who we've been, but by who we choose to become. If Mira's strength moved you, if the Alpha King's devotion captured your heart, if this tale of dark romance and hidden power kept you reading, show your support by liking this video, leaving a comment about which moment resonated with you most, and subscribing for more stories that explore the shadows between love and power. The spaces where ordinary people become extraordinary. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to remember their own hidden strength. Thank you for being part of this journey.